I've just pressed record on this. So we're recording this webinar. So at the end of the webinar, you will get a recording, you'll get a PDF of the slides, and you will get confirmation of attendance as well. Okay, so that will be sent to you within a couple of days, a couple of working days after this webinar. Okay, so as Aldana just asked me, yes, you will get a confirmation of attendance sent via email to the email address that you registered for this webinar with. Okay, so I think that's all from me, and that means I'm going to hand over to Jane. Now, Jane is a teacher and a teacher trainer. She has worked in International House in Porto and has worked in International House in Newcastle, where she works now as a CELTA and Delta tutor. She also does various workshops and training sessions, and she has a master's in teaching English to younger learners. I think that's what TEYL stands for. So without any further ado, I'll hand you over to Jane. So Jane, it's all yours.
Hello, can everybody see and hear me? Hello, Manuela, and everybody else. Oh, it's great. Thank you, Gareth. Yes, you can all see me. Good. And hear me. So we'll start, shall we? So today's session, we're going to be looking at some projects and project-based learning. I'm going to stop looking at the chat box. Okay. So our aims tonight are, or today, wherever you are, to explore what project work is in English language teaching, and how I've used it and how you use it, I hope, and then to discuss perhaps some issues and concerns. I'm not sure if I like the word problems now, but some issues that we may have with project work, and how we can then look at project-based learning and how that may benefit learners more. And I've put together a project-based learning framework which we could use in English language teaching, and we'll look at it and hopefully discuss whether you think this is something suitable and something you could use. Okay, so I hope that all sounds good and fun. I'll move on. So like Gareth said, I used to teach in International House in Porto, and where I started my teaching career 20 years ago. And one of the first things I did was I was teaching all of the children because nobody else wanted to teach them, and I loved teaching kids. And here's a lovely picture of one of my groups. I was wondering if anyone knew them. Anyway, I had lots of groups of sort of 6, 7, 8-year-olds up to 10-year-olds, and we were doing a typical kind of young learner course, which was about animals, looking at animals. And so at the end of this section in the course book, we put together a display. We had a project. I gave each child a name of an animal, and they had to draw a picture and write about the animal, what it can do, where it lives, all of that typical kind of things that we do about with kids. And then they had to make the wall display and decide how they were going to put it together. So they put it as a zoo. We decided to make a zoo, and they had to decide which animals would go with which in the pens and the cages, and how they were going to put the zoo together. Which animals would they put near each other, and which animals they would keep separated. So we ended up with a fantastic wall display of these animals. But like I say, it was quite a few years ago and before digital cameras, so unfortunately the only visuals I have are in my memory. But that didn't stay that way for very long. And I'm hoping you've done some kind of projects like that. When I was the Director of Studies at International House Porto, so I was there for 15 plus years at International House, and as a Director of Studies in Porto, we put together this whole school project. So I'd moved on from not just doing class projects, but for the whole school. this was quite an important year for Porto because it's when their new metro was being built and opened. And so we wanted to, like I say, bring some of the outside into the classroom, some of the real world. So our objectives with this project was getting the students to identify their favourite place in Porto. They then had to explain why it was their favourite place. Perhaps they had to draw a picture or take a photo. It didn't really matter. And then each class had its own metro line. So there's 2 or 3 metro lines in Porto, but we made our own map and put it on a display. So there were these strong links between the outside world and what we were doing in the classroom. So the other main objective was to produce a visual display, a stunning visual display. Have a look. What do you think? So it's a huge wall, and it covered the whole wall. And as you can see, a lot of work went into it, getting every child, every student in the classroom. It wasn't just children, it was every age and every level putting their work on one project. And we had students, we had whole families who were in the school, and it really got people to come into the school and have a look at what was going on. We got, like I say, whole families, and people would come in, so brothers and sisters were all on there, and they'd all put their things on, and yeah, it's better than the London Underground. Thanks, Silvana. We got it really looking really nice. And what I was really proud of as the director of studies was the fact that every student in the school had done the same task. So the differentiation was by outcome. So what they produced was different, not what the task was. So for the little ones, they would just draw a picture and maybe write a few words, whatever they could. And for the older, sort of advanced students, they would write descriptions about why they liked that place and why it really meant something to them, and the links that they had out it. So we were very, very proud of this metro project. Thanks everybody for putting such lovely things about our project. Yes, I was very proud of it. So my question now would be, have you produced projects like that in your classrooms? Okay, so here's our first poll, or only poll. Thanks, Gareth. Can you just click on yes or no? Who's done? Let's get an idea of who's done some projects in class. Oh, okay. Only about 60% of you. Okay. Oh, some of you are writing in there. Yeah, it's difficult to see. Okay, you're going up. It's going up a bit. Oh, I'm glad to see a lot of you are doing projects in class, because I do think that they're very inspiring and motivating for the learners. Okay, thanks, Gareth. You can take that down now. Yep. Great. So let's have a look. What kind of projects have you done? And share your ideas in the chat box, because you might see something that you think, yes, I'd like to do that as well. So what kind of projects have you done? Let's get inspired. Let's inspire each other. And I'll try and get and collect some of your ideas so I can put that in the blog at the end. Anybody done anything? A tree of wishes. I love that idea, Daniela. That's a nice one. A project about World War One. Interesting. Earth Day. Good. Yeah, best sites is a good one for your whichever country you're in. Food. Oh, a video of your favourite dishes. Oh, there's loads there. I'm hoping everyone can see all these and get inspired. Planting trees, recycling. That's a good one. I've done that before. Planting planting sunflower seeds and then measuring how tall they're getting, which one's the tallest. It's a good one. Convince a total stranger to take a picture with them. That's good. Pretend you're a student. Best life hacks ever. Oh, there's so many there. I hope you're all reading them. So why do you like projects? What do you find are useful about projects? Oops, the next one. What a positive. Oops. This cooperation and creativeness, yes. Project of the Garden Dwarfs. They're very motivating, and there's definitely a lot of teamwork and developing different skills. Good. A lot of creativity. You're writing too fast. The flipped classroom, yeah, all independent skills. There's lots of positive things here about why you like project work. I really enjoy project work. I think it's very satisfying. I think there's a lot of positives that come out of doing projects, and it's productive, and there's collaboration and group work. Very tangible results. Yes, good. All of those ideas are brilliant. I'm going to put a little however at the end of this sentence. However, yeah, rewarding. All of these things are good. But in order to move ourselves forward, we now need to think, do you have any issues or problems with project work? And what do you think those could be? Time, yes, a huge one, isn't it? The time management is it. And I remember my first year doing that zoo project, didn't realise that I'd spent the whole term doing one project instead of 3 units in the book. Time managing, grading, yes, how do you assess it? Not everyone's cooperative. Some end up doing more work than the others, don't they? Keeping everybody at the same, yeah, time and assessment, interactive. I think that's lots of passive students. Yes, I think all of these issues are what we want to talk about. So if we talk about them in terms of considerations, okay, so we're not going to call them problems, we're just going to call them considerations. So the first consideration is that it's coordinated by the teacher. The teacher designs the task and sets it up and then assesses it. So in the case of my Metro Porto project, the rubric was exactly the same for every student. I set it, almost left the students to it, and then when they returned the work, it was then given a grade. And so it's very teacher-centered. Okay. The second thing that consideration issue is the fact that it's always connected to the course book. We tend to do projects at the end of a unit, at the end of a module. So we're using projects to consolidate prior learning, just like I did with my zoo. Yeah, it was consolidating all the learning that had taken place. They knew the language, the present simple, the likes and dislikes, the can for ability. So they then used that because we'd studied it, and they were consolidating it in producing the zoo display. So there's a strong link to the curriculum and the syllabus, which has been dictated to us either by the course book or the institute. We can't get away from that, really. So, but it's a concern that everything is so strongly connected to the course book. But I'm not saying not to do it. I'm just saying that this is a concern. The focus is always on the final product. So the outcome, the what is produced, is just a variation of a theme. They all seem to be doing the same thing, or they all end up doing the same thing. Because of this, there's a lack of student choices and student decisions. The students are not consulted when the task is set. The task is set by the teacher, and so there's no student choice. And sometimes there's a lack of relevance to the student. How is doing this relevant to them, to the students? Does anybody agree with these, or do you think it's just me being difficult? You are agreeing, yeah? Plagiarism. Well, I like to think of sharing ideas. Yeah, so I know what you mean. You mean they're just taking stuff from the internet and putting it in. Yeah, it doesn't always have to be linked, but it very often is. These are just the issues, and then in order to make our projects better, we can then take these issues and change them. So you cannot change what you don't acknowledge. So if you acknowledge that these are the considerations we need, we can turn it around. Okay, so what do we need? We need a project work that puts the learners at the center of the project. That was the first thing we want to see. We want the learners to want to do the project. We need project work that will help develop educational skills while learning takes place. So there's a key word there, the while learning takes place, rather than after learning takes place, which is what we've just said project work tends to be. Yeah, and educational skills, you know, the learning to learn skills, the technology skills that we're seeing so much of today. We need a project that makes sure the focus is not only on the outcome. It's not about the destination, it's about the journey. You know, how they got there. Very often, if you've set a project with a rubric, sometimes it's taken home and they do it all at home, and there's no peer collaboration. It's just all done possibly by the parents. So nobody knows, or the teacher doesn't know quite what's happening. They just see the final outcome, and how much support and help they got from that, you don't know. So make sure that the focus of this project is not on that. We need a project work that allows learners to steer and guide the direction the project takes. So again, we're putting the learners are important, not the teachers dictating which direction it goes in. Yes, the process is so important. We need project work that prepares learners for real life. Yeah, the skills that they're going to use in real life, not just for classrooms and not just for presenting work at the end of a project. And finally, we need project work that has a real purpose behind the outcome of the project. So with these ideas in mind, we need, what we need is project-based learning. Okay, so this is different to project work, project-based learning. Now, the leaders in this seem to be the Buck Institute for Education, and this is how they've defined project-based learning. Project-based learning is a teaching method in which students gain knowledge and skills by working for an extended period of time to investigate and respond to authentic, engaging and complex question, problem or challenge. So we're going to explore this in a minute. We're going to see what that actually means. At the end of the session, there's a handout in which you can get all of the links that I'm mentioning, and also on the last slide you can get them as well. So don't worry. But this is definitely the Buck Institute for Education is somewhere to start for to look at for project-based learning. So I'll just find my notes. We live in a world of projects. Real life projects. That's how we live. Here's a lovely picture of me that one of my students did to show, and I'm going to tell you some of the projects, some of the big major projects I've had in my life in the last few years. So the first big project was leaving Portugal and returning to England. So if you think about the skills I had to develop there in coordinating and planning, taking my family, including my dog, and from one place to another, I gave myself a good 2 weeks to do this. Find a new job, find somewhere to live, and get settled, and move all of my things. So that was one of the biggest projects that I had to do. And then I got married. And again, think of all the things that you have to coordinate when you're getting married. These are real world life projects that we all have to do, and skills that you're developing as you do them. Nowadays, my world projects, my life projects tend to be my garden. And here's a little picture of my garden where we've had to build raised beds, decide what to plant, coordinate buying all of that, and keep doing things like this. And I also enjoy doing some crafting, so that means, seeing visually how to put things together and using my skills of creating material and then putting it into bags and things. That's what I usually do in this room rather than webinars. Okay, so while I'm doing these life projects, I'm developing skills. Oh, I thought I had a list of skills there. And I'm using these skills in my work as well. So when my director asked me if I would organise a training day for the teachers in the school and for teachers in and around the north of England, it's like, yes. We said, but we want a training day that will also be fun. What we're looking for is a day that we can call an edutainment day. So they come to be educated and entertained at the same time. So he gave me a bit of a budget, and he had some requirements as to when it could be, the cost, the time, and how many people could come, things like this. So there was a list of tasks I had to do, and a list of requirements and things that I needed to organise. So in order to do that, I had to organise this day. I had to organise everything. I had to manage a team of people. I had a small team of people who I could then allocate jobs to and designate. We did some research to find out what kind of sessions people wanted, who would come to these sessions. Yeah, we asked other people, and we created materials to get interest in it and do some further research. We got feedback from our colleagues to find out how this is all going to work and when it should be and all of this. And we collected all of this information together and then went back to the director and presented our ideas and suggestions. Okay, so these things are things I'm sure you've done as well. So while doing all of this, all of these projects I've just talked about, what skills was I doing? Well, there's a lot of this, a lot of critical thinking, a lot of collaboration, and a lot of communication. And so these are the skills that we want to try to get into the projects for our learners. I'm glad you're saying it's all familiar to you as well. I'm sure it's familiar to everybody doing these things. Yeah, so what we want to do is to try and get our students to do this as well. So the idea of project-based learning is that teachers get students to focus on a project, one that will deepen their knowledge in the topic and that builds the skills they need in the future. Okay, so to explain a little bit more about how project-based learning would work in a classroom, we're going to look at a sort of an idea that would happen in a mainstream school. Okay, so forgetting that we're language teachers for a minute, this is how it would work in a mainstream classroom. So here we have our teacher, Mr. Gregory. And Mr. Gregory has recently discovered project-based learning when his pupils started talking about something they'd heard on the news. And that was that there was a threat of a water shortage in England. Now, I know you think that's not true, but it is. We often have water shortages. It's not that uncommon in England, where you're not allowed to use hose pipes and things like this. So he asked his class what they used water for. And obviously they knew the direct things, that they drank water, they use it to go to the toilet for washing, but then they started thinking about different things that water is used for. So he put them into groups. Okay, so I've just numbered these groups and coloured them there so you can see, but obviously he had more students in his class, but for our example, he's put them into groups, and each group have discovered how much water is used in things that they find in their normal shopping trolley. So things like producing meat, or growing crops, or making bread, or producing fizzy drinks, all of these typical items. Yeah. And they've gone off and they research about how much water is used in each of these products. Before I show you, do you want to try and guess how much water is used to produce a beef burger? Does anyone want to have a guess? How much water do you think is used to produce a beef burger? A great amount. 2 litres, 3 litres. You're going to be amazed. Yeah, Natalia's nearly there. It's actually 2,000 litres. So if we think about how much water a cow needs for its whole life, yeah, and look at you all going, no idea, wow, yeah, and the students, the kids were just as impressed and just as motivated when they found out how much each thing, and of course that makes them stimulated. They want to say, oh, and how much is used for loaves of bread, and how much water is used to make a litre of Coke, or a litre of milk. They were so amazed at this. But then they shared everything. They shared, each of these little groups shared to the rest of the class how much water was used. So this then stimulated more conversation about how they could conserve water. So Mr. Gregory mixed up the groups. So there was one person from each of their original groups and put them together, and then they had to do some more research about how water could be conserved and what they could do in minimizing water. So now each group then had to decide how they could present their work. One group made a video, which they put on the social media, and others made presentations using Prezi, for example. Others used PowerPoint. They made posters. They had flyers that they put up around the school. But more importantly, they invited teachers from the school to come and listen and watch their videos and see the work they'd done. These teachers then invited the students to go back into the other classrooms and to present their ideas to the other students, the other children in the class. Okay, so there was a purpose behind the presentation. They were telling everybody what they should be doing, what they'd found out, and how they could conserve water. Then they invited parents to come and listen to this, and teachers from other schools. And gradually everybody else wanted to know more and more about what was going on, and getting more and more people involved. And then that got them more and more interested and more stimulated until another project would come along. Okay, so that's how project-based learning is working. So this is how they were more regrouped afterwards. So the skills that the students and children were developing were critical thinking, collaboration, cooperation, communication, research methods, and presentation. Lots and lots of different skills while learning was taking place. So there's also content happening there as well, and hopefully language. So that's a quick sort of summary as to how it would work in a state school. Okay. If there's any questions, please put them in the chat box. Gareth is collecting them and putting them into another folder for me so I can answer them later. Okay. The Buck Institute for Education has identified these as following elements as what would be important in project-based learning. So they've said that project-based learning, they would need key knowledge and understanding of success skills. The project focuses on student learning goals, including standard-based content and skills such as critical thinking and problem solving. And I think this is quite important. There needs to be a challenging problem or question that's meaningful and appropriate to the level of challenge for the students. There should be a sustained inquiry. So not just a quick looking at something and that's it, but finding resources and applying information and then going back and finding more resources and doing it again. Yeah. There's this feeling that there's the authenticity of the project. The project features real world context, real world tasks and real world tools that they can use and take forward. And it's all about their students and how they have reacted to this as well. There's the student voice and choice. Students are making the decision about where they want this project to go and including how they want to work. At the same time, they have to reflect on their learning and the effectiveness of their inquiry and projects and the activities that they're doing. There's the critique and revision, so looking back at what they've done, receiving and giving feedback to each other and improving their process and products. And finally, there's this public product. Students make their work public by explaining, displaying and presenting it beyond the classroom. So not just on the wall, but so to me this makes very good pedagogic sense. And I hope you agree. And like I say, Buck Institute has lots of little videos that will help you find out more about it and ideas. And I think you can, like I say, click on this later and have a look. Okay, so let's go back to my Metro project. It got me thinking. After I found out all about this, I kept thinking, how could I change my Metro project to be more project-based learning? How could I put the students at the centre of the project? What inquiry or problem could I create that needs a solution in order to get them involved and engaged in that? And the bit that I was very proud of, the fact that it was one task fits all, I then felt, perhaps that's not suitable after all. How can I ensure that the age-appropriate academic content for every age, stage and level of learner? Yes, okay. So when I was thinking about all of these things, I've come up with the framework, a framework for PBL, which I'm going to talk through now. Okay. Again, let's put to one side that when I did my Metro project, it was in a language school. The students had 2 or 3 hours a week at various times. It wasn't in a state school. So it is quite difficult, I think, to think about it and trying to get everything together. So the first step on our framework is generate and stimulate. If you've taught young learners and teens, which a lot of you have, I saw at the beginning a lot of you are teaching that, you know that it's what motivates these age groups is the topics and the activities they're doing and the things that you ask them to do. It's not the language. They certainly don't get motivated because they're studying the present continuous. It's what they're doing with it that's important. So the Metro at the time was a topical debate because a lot of money was put into this. So there was a lot of discussion. Even at young ages, there was a lot of discussion about whether it was a good thing or a bad thing. The route that the Metro was taking, whether that was just, it was on a railway line, they didn't stop and think, oh, there's a new shopping centre, we should have a Metro stop by the shopping centre. No. So there was a lot of discussion about these things, whether the students agreed or disagreed with all of them. So you can get them motivated in this, and you have to kind of get them to think that it's come from them. So even though the teacher can drip some of this motivation and stir it up and generate and stimulate interest, make it look like it's come from them. Yeah, so that's one of the things I was thinking about with the Metro project. So it's a teacher's job to build curiosity. Okay, we're putting to one side the fact that this is a language school at the moment. We were just setting out what the framework is for PBL. So after generating and stimulating, we then have to define and refine a driving question. So what is a driving question? It's one that cannot be Googled. The answer cannot be simply Googled. It's got to be a bit more than that. And it's amazing how much the students can come up with these questions. They need to be phrased so that the children are worded so that they can understand them. So not something like what methods could be used to maximize the capacity of the train, but how can we get as many people on the train as possible? Where would the seats be? How many people can stand up? Those kind of questions. Then they can look at it and try and discuss how they would get more and more people on. So driving questions for the Metro. If you've got any ideas, please feel free to put them into the chat box. What methods do you think would be suitable? Lots of you typing. There's no straight answer. Absolutely not. Okay, so once you've got your driving question, thanks, Beatrice. Yes, maybe which stations are the most crowded and why? How can they avoid that? How could they get more or look after that? Lots of things. Okay, we'll go on to the next section. Once you've got your driving question and you've defined it and refined it, so you might start off and get lots of questions from the students, what they want to explore, and then you've refined it down to the 1 or 2. At this point, you may even have put them into groups, and they could all be doing different questions and exploring different avenues. That doesn't matter. Once you've done that, you're going to designate and collaborate. So this is where the project truly starts, where the goals are set and you're ensuring that the goals are SMART goals. So if you know what SMART goals are, they have to be specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and timely. Okay, meaning that every student has something specific to do, they can see exactly what it is and how much they have to do, that it's achievable, they're able to do this, it's all relevant to the final outcome, and they've got a point by which they have to do it. Yeah. So by designating learners to do different things, they have this sense of collaboration, so that not one student feels like doing all of the work. They're not isolated in their research. They're doing it together. There must be a collaboration going on. So at this point, it would be quite important to display the goals, perhaps put them up on the wall to say who is doing what and when it should be done by. Something for each group. So this is the opportunity to value each and every member of the class and make sure that each and every member of the class is doing something. Yeah. Again, keep writing your questions. It's helping me. So that was designate and collaborate, making sure that group work is a strong part of the project-based learning. Okay. So the next stage in our PBL framework would be compare and share. So it's important there's a continuum of input and feedback that's coming from peers as well as from the teacher. So when you get them into groups, that they can then go and compare what other groups are doing, compare what they've done to other groups, and that they are sharing ideas, because that will only make all of the projects better. If they're doing it isolated and they don't see what other people are doing, they won't be inspired. Looking at what others are doing, they can see and they can adapt what they're doing to help themselves and to help each other. So it's really important that you're giving and taking critical feedback in part of their development, part of their skills. So we've got a little think mnemonic here so you can set expectations and provide guidelines to giving feedback to each other. So when they're saying this, when they're giving feedback to each other, they have to think, is it true? Is what I'm saying true? Is it helpful for the other person? Is it inspiring for the other person or group? Is it necessary for me to say this? And is it kind? So we want to make sure that there's still a growth mindset going on, so that they are nurturing this and they're learning how to receive and use feedback productively, accepting these criticisms as suggestions for improvement rather than focusing on the failure, on what they've done if they're not happy with it. Okay, so I quite like this little mnemonic, and I think that it's useful when you're getting them to talk about giving each other feedback. So the next stage in our framework is enhance and advance. So when they're starting their project, they're using the knowledge and skills that they already have and the language, but then they have to develop these further through the tasks, through the research that they're doing, and this is what makes perfect pedagogic sense. Their starting point is with what they know already, and they're moving that forward, they're enhancing it, and they're advancing. Where we have to create a context that interests them, which in turn has defined the language that they need to complete the task. So we've got to integrate the language and content and skills development going on here, which I think is very important. And again, this is, if you're doing CLIL, if any of you are teaching in a CLIL environment, it really does make pedagogic sense for this. But it's not to say that we can't do this anywhere else. Project-based learning means it's possible to adapt goals for learners at different proficiency levels. So if you've got stronger students, that's their starting point. That's where they'll be heading from to advance. Having the content the learners have created as the backdrop provides meaningful language in which they can use it. More so than a course book, I think. So what we need is to enhance and advance our HOTS rather than LOTS. Do you know what the HOTS are? Does anybody know what HOTS are? No? See if anybody does. No. Okay. Apart from you, Gareth. HOTS are, thank you, Tatiana, higher order thinking skills. Perhaps you haven't heard of these before. Higher order thinking skills are skills developing reasoning skills, inquiry, discussion skills, creative thinking skills, evaluating your work and, like saying, responding to others, responding to criticism, hypothesizing. These are all higher order thinking skills. And LOTS, or lower order thinking skills, are really just remembering information or ordering the information you have in front of you, ranking it, defining the object. Okay, which is okay, but we want to try and get a lot more out of the learners than we are. Okay, and also we want to try and develop 21st century skills, which are content knowledge for 21st century themes. There's learning and innovation skills, information, media and technology skills, life and career skills. This goes on and on. We have so many 21st century skills coming up, much more than we've ever had before. Obviously, it's the 21st century. There is a handout at the end in which you can also find out more about 21st century skills and how we can help our students develop these. Okay, so I don't want to spend... Oh, we're running out of time. Still got loads to go. Let's go. Let's get on. Next one. Okay, review and revise. So, reflecting on what has been achieved and what they would do. So very similar to the compare and share, but rather than giving each other feedback here, they're looking at critically at what they have produced or what they're doing and reflecting on it and saying, well, how could I have done that better? And this is quite a key stage as well, I think, in PBL. Reflecting and saying, next time I would like to do this. Okay. Which leaves us to the next one, our final, produce and present. So all of this is leading towards the product and the project that's going to be outside, making it real, making it count. What kind of things? The final product doesn't have to be a poster. It can be, and it needs to be more than just to their class peers. With technology and things today, there's so much you can do to publish work for your students, and all the different formats, from infographics, creating infographics, to using Minecraft, all sorts of things. And if you've got any other suggestions, please put those in the chat box now, and I can add them to the Q&A blog post as well. So anything that you think they could do to produce and present their research or their project, mind maps, leaflets, all presentations. Yeah. There's just so many. The fact that you could do a Minecraft is amazing. Newsreels, yeah, Prezi presentations. And then you see, you get to these Prezi presentations and then learning the skills of Prezi because they need them, not because it's been a criteria on the task at the beginning of the teacher setting the project. And it all depends on the project. It certainly does. Never heard of Minecraft. Neither have I. Not really. I know it's a game. Okay. So, an ebook, that's a good one, and comics, yeah, school websites, blogs. There's so many, isn't there? There's so many ideas. Brilliant. We'll get those and put that in the question in a blog as well. So the reason this framework is done in a circle is because from the work that they've produced and presented, it very often stimulates more questions, and it generates interest from others, or in the same class or in other classes, and you can then almost start again with a new question. So it's like a spiral, an upwardly spiraling thing, you know, once you get involved in project-based learning. There's a massive global network out there all talking about PBL, and you need to go and see some of the things that people are doing out there. Like I say, we'll give you some links in a minute. So our framework is not complete just yet, because we need to make sure that our student is at the heart of this project, and that as much as possible reflecting the needs and interests of each and every learner in the class. But it's the students that are guiding and steering and are taking these things on board. Secondly, it's the teacher. So rather than, before we said the teacher just set the project and almost left, now the teacher needs to coordinate and micromanage each and of the whole process and each of the stages in the whole process. So it's not about giving it to the learner and walking away. It's a lot more work for us, a lot. But we have to manage it and make sure that we're on top of everything. Yes, and there's something else missing, isn't there? Language. Let us not forget that we are language teachers, and that some of you have pointed out, but my students don't have the language to do this. Well, that's why you need to then give them the language to do this. So at each stage, they may need a different set of language, and they can come back and use that again. So if you're in the designate and collaborate stage, you'll need language like, why don't you do, I could do this, what about you doing? So there's that set of language is what they need to do it. And if you find that they're only doing it in their own language, then that's what you need to teach them. You need to listen to what they're saying in their own language and make sure they've got the language to do it. So all of this needs to happen, all of this language input at every stage. And there's a lot of different places where you can incorporate different skills. So all reading, listening, speaking, writing at every stage as well. So time needs to be allocated to language input as well as all of these other things. How are we feeling about that? Yes, pre-teaching all of it. I'm going to just show you the final with all the questions on as well. Oh, I think that's it. That's putting everything together. So this is our PBL framework for EFL. What do you think? And I think you're going, oh, it's far too much to do. Lots of scope. I think PBL makes complete pedagogic sense, as I've said. Is it suitable? Is PBL suitable for EFL? Yeah. It's all coming up far too quick for me to read. I'm hoping you're saying yes, it is suitable. I think it's up to you to bite off as much as you can chew. Okay, so here's a little seed that has been sown. It's up to you how fast and how well you nurture it, whether it's a slow growing one or if it's going to go off quickly. You need to decide how much you could get into one lesson, or if you want to do it over a period of lessons. It's just a framework, it's a method. You might just take parts of this and think, yes, I want to do this bit in my classes. I can adapt this to suit my lessons. How much of it you use is up to you. It's really difficult to say, yes, I'm going to do the whole lot tomorrow. You have to choose what's suitable and what's manageable for your situation. Okay, so we're just about finished. I just want to tell you one more thing. So when I was studying for my masters, I came across this MMM, and I've really made it my life philosophy. It was in the Primary English Teacher's Guide, and it was about how young learners learn language. So rather than PPP, which is present, practice, produce, they said that young learners need to meet language and then have some time to manipulate it, to play with it, to put it into different contexts, and then to make it their own, so to take ownership of it. And this is what I want you to do with PBL. And this is what I think is good about PBL, because they're meeting ideas and content and language, and they're manipulating it and having ownership, not just of the language, but of the content and of the skills that they're developing. They're making it their own so that they've got it and they can take it forward. Okay, and now you're going to do that as well. You've met the idea of PBL. It's up to you to decide how much you're going to manipulate it and how you're going to manipulate it into your lessons. And hopefully you will get a sense of belonging and make PBL yours so that you can adapt it to your situations. And then share it. MMM. There's some more on my blog about MMM, so feel free to go and have a look at that. Oh, Gareth, did you get any questions? I think I'm just about finished. Okay.
Jane, there's questions in the little box if you want to answer them now, but if you want to wait and just do those in the follow-up, then
I'll do them in the follow-up. Getting a bit short of time, aren't we?
Okay. So, yeah.
So here are some links that I talked about earlier. Gareth, if you can put the handout on, and then people could download the handout that's got links as well. That's the one. Yeah. Can you move it up so that it doesn't cover the other links?
Sure. So if people watching this now, if you click on the line promoting project-based learning and then click on download files, you should be able to download that to your own computer. So.
And they've got the framework in there as well as links. So keep the questions coming. Thank you ever so much for attending. The best place to start if you're interested in PBL is Google and Pinterest. There's so many visuals on Pinterest of people who have done things. Go and have a look. Go and get inspired. It's amazing. Thank you, everybody.
So much, Jane. Thank you. That's brilliant. Jane, you mentioned your own blog. Is that the final address there? The jmhdr.wordpress.com. Is that your blog?
That's mine.
Okay. So people, if you want a link to Jane's blog, that's that final link. You should just be able to click on it on the screen, and it will open in your server. So you can do that. Or if I'm very clever now, which I'm not. I can put a link into the chat box as well for you for Jane's blog. Jane, thank you very much for that. Thank you everybody who has taken part and has contributed, asked questions. As I said, I've been taking notes of the questions and some of the comments that you've made, and I've put them into a chat box. Jane will write a question and answer session, so hopefully she'll deal with some of those as as in that, and it will go up on the OUP Global blog. I'd like you to do feedback if it works. This never ever works for me. Let's see if it works today. If you can, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll stop recording as well. First